In 2025, if you're not demanding the repeal of Section 704, you don't respect the Constitution. Why local rights and children's health depend on ending this 1996 relic. A law that denies basic freedoms. Imagine discovering that the cell tower near your child's elementary school was placed there without any real local debate, without the ability for you, the school board, or the city council to argue on health grounds. You might assume you could file a grievance, start a petition, or at least get a hearing. After all, this is America, the land of local democracy and constitutional freedoms. But with Section 704 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, your local government cannot legally weigh health or environmental concerns when approving new wireless infrastructure. If the tower meets outdated Federal Communications Commission thermal-only exposure guidelines from the mid-1990s, that's the end of the story. No matter how many modern studies show potential risks from non-thermal exposures, or how worried parents are about children's developing brains, the law literally forbids local or state authorities from opposing such towers on these bases. For a nation that prides itself on respecting the Constitution, Section 704 stands out as a glaring contradiction. First Amendment freedoms are curtailed because entire categories of evidence, such as health effects, are not even allowed in legal or council discussions. 10th Amendment principles of local governance are effectively crushed by a centralized, one-size-fits-all approach to infrastructure regulation. This piece is written to rally everyone, political left, right, center, or beyond, because if you truly value the Constitution and the health of future generations, ignoring Section 704 is no longer an option. We can debate whether RF radiation from cell towers or Wi-Fi might cause harm, but that is precisely the point. Under Section 704, you cannot even have that debate at the local level if your reason is health-related. That law must go. Section 704 in context, a Clinton-era relic and its legacy. Section 704 arrived during the telecom boom under President Bill Clinton. Cell phones at the time were used by a smaller segment of the population, texting was minimal, and 5G was not even a faint whisper. Telecom industry lobbyists, eager to build out wireless networks rapidly, successfully convinced Congress and the White House to ensure that local communities could not stand in their way. This was partially justified by the race for innovation. The U.S. didn't want to fall behind on deploying new wireless infrastructure. But along the way, many politicians conveniently overlooked the fundamental rights of communities to challenge the placement of powerful transmitters near schools, hospitals, or neighborhoods. The law has remained essentially untouched for almost 3 decades, through multiple administrations, Republican and Democrat alike, despite mounting evidence of its constitutional and scientific shortcomings. Key aspects of Section 704 include preventing localities from denying cell tower permits on health grounds. If a company meets FCC guidelines, local governments are barred from using safety or environmental concerns to say no. Prohibiting courts from considering health evidence. If a local group files a lawsuit to stop a tower next to a playground, the judge can't weigh the community's evidence on radio frequency hazards if they meet the 1996-era standard. This unique carve-out places telecom infrastructure in a realm above normal zoning debates. A city council can reject a liquor store permit if they believe it might harm the neighborhood, yet the same council cannot reject a cell tower near an elementary school if they believe it might pose a health risk. That's not just ironic, many would call it un-American. The constitutional crisis. Why the First and 10th Amendments matter. The 10th Amendment, reserved powers for states. The 10th Amendment clearly states that any powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states or the people. Typically, issues like zoning, land use, and public health fall under local or state jurisdiction. Indeed, communities are used to deciding whether a factory can be built near a school or if a new highway should cut through a residential area. But Section 704 hijacks that local authority regarding cell towers. It says, in effect, you can't say no for health reasons. If that's not a violation of 10th Amendment principles, it's at least a major intrusion on them. States and municipalities are forced to rubber stamp towers because the federal government demands compliance, so long as the telecom firm claims compliance with FCC guidelines. The First Amendment, the right to petition for redress of grievances. Although the First Amendment is often cited in relation to free speech and religious freedom, it also protects the right of citizens to petition their government about concerns. When people hold local council meetings or file lawsuits, they are exercising this right. Yet Section 704 blocks entire categories of evidence from consideration, effectively silencing discussions about potential health hazards. A citizen's petition can be thrown out simply because the basis is, we are worried about children's health. By removing health arguments from the scope of legal or legislative debate, Section 704 arguably stifles that fundamental right to petition, and for a reason that's hardly reconcilable with the Bill of Rights. If the Constitution is meant to protect the people from overreaching federal power, this law inverts the very principle by telling local governments, shut up about health or environmental concerns. The great irony. We can choose cereal but not protect our schools. Consumer choice is lauded as a pillar of freedom in America. Don't like a certain cereal's ingredients or food dye? Choose something else at the grocery store. Want to avoid certain chemicals in plastic bottles? Buy glass. This is the logic of free markets. You make the call. But when a cell tower is slated to pop up a few hundred feet from your child's school, that freedom vanishes if you try to challenge it on health grounds. Now, the local authority cannot respond with, we think that's too close to a school given the scientific debate about children's vulnerability to chronic RF exposure. The law, Section 704, removes that choice. So in the bigger sense, we have more freedom in trivial consumer decisions than in vital health and safety concerns regarding industrial-scale wireless infrastructure. Many parents discover this freedom paradox only when they see tower construction equipment rolling in. They try to protest, gather petitions, or speak at city council. They quickly learn that health arguments are not allowed, so the conversation is forced to revolve around superficial issues, like the tower's aesthetics or minor property boundary constraints. Something is deeply wrong if the country that proclaims to champion personal liberties can't let citizens discuss health concerns about electromagnetic radiation near children. Are non-thermal RF dangers real, or crazy cooties? One reason many shrug about Section 704 is the assumption that there's no real hazard anyway. Only tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists believe that. This sentiment might be captured by the phrase crazy coyotes, dismissing concerned citizens as cranks. But that's an unfair simplification. Growing Scientific Evidence National Toxicology Program, NTP, a $30 million U.S. government study found clear evidence that non-thermal RF exposure caused certain tumors in rats. Ramazzini Institute replicated similar findings at lower exposures. Bioinitiative Report, a compilation of over 1,300 peer-reviewed studies revealing consistent non-thermal biological effects, oxidative stress, neurological impacts, reproductive harm, and more. Tumor Treating Fields, TTF, and Therabionic. These FDA-approved or clinically studied therapies use extremely low-level electromagnetic fields to halt tumor growth in certain cancer patients, proving that subthermal intensities do affect cellular processes. Far from a fringe conspiracy, these data points indicate that the notion of non-thermal biological effects is well-founded. Even if some details remain under debate, it's disingenuous to say no real discussion is warranted, especially when it comes to children's constant exposure in classrooms or at home. Why dismissing the debate harms everyone? If parents want to air concerns, or if local health officials want to look into possible links to conditions like headaches, ADHD-like symptoms, or fertility issues, they should have the freedom to do so. Yet Section 704 effectively shuts them down. So the question is not, is there 100% proof of harm? The question is, should a single federal law block communities from even considering up-to-date science? MAGA and MAHA loud on social media, silent on Section 704. The fake outrage problem. Two grassroots rallying cries exist today. MAGA, Make America Great Again, and MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. They claim to champion American values, family safety, or good old-fashioned freedom. So it would seem obvious that a law undermining the Constitution and threatening kids' health would be top priority. Yet both movements typically remain silent on Section 704. Why the silence? Perhaps confronting powerful telecom lobbies is less attractive than rallying supporters with simpler culture war issues. Or maybe it's simply ignorance. Many leaders and followers do not know Section 704's specifics, but either way, ignoring a direct assault on local governance and children's health undercuts the movement's moral authority. MAGA often talks about draining the swamp, but Section 704 was a product of corporate lobby-driven policy in the 1990s. If they want to highlight the failings of past administrations, like Bill Clinton's, here is a glaring example. MAHA touts wholesome living, skepticism of processed foods or harmful chemicals, yet overlooks a law that cements 1996-based safety standards for widespread electromagnetic exposures. If they truly want Americans healthy, they should demand modern science be heard in local tower permit processes. A litmus test of authenticity. If these movements fail to champion repealing Section 704, critics will say they're not serious about freedom or health. They may be more content stirring controversies over fruit dyes or junk food bans than tackling a complex issue with huge corporate interests at stake. That's not leadership, that's evasion. Outdated FCC guidelines, the thermal-only myth, thermal versus non-thermal. In 1996, the FCC set guidelines assuming that tissue heating was the only relevant biological effect from RF radiation. The limit basically ensures your skin or brain doesn't heat above a certain threshold if you hold a phone or stand near a transmitter. But the last quarter century of research has shown non-thermal effects can happen at power levels far below the threshold for heating. Some revolve around ion channel modulation, oxidative stress, or DNA breaks. These do not require a temperature increase. That's the heart of the dispute. The FCC's "it must cook you" approach is archaic. Why we deserve updated standards. Kids use phones differently than adults, often with devices directly against their heads or bodies for hours a day. Cumulative exposure is skyrocketing with the proliferation of home Wi-Fi, 5G small cells, smart appliances, etc. Real-world conditions differ vastly from the test scenarios used in 1996. If your local government tries to cite these points as reasons for more protective guidelines, Section 704 blocks them from enacting or even debating it, so the thermal-only model persists by legal fiat, not by virtue of superior evidence. A true assault on local rights. The mechanics of Section 704. Let's clarify how Section 704 crushes local rights permit approvals. A city or county can't deny a wireless facility permit based on health or environmental concerns if the facility meets FCC's old standards. If the council tries, the telecom can sue, and the court will side with the company because Section 704 explicitly forbids health-based rejections. Court constraints. Citizens can't sue to block the tower by presenting evidence that RF exposures might cause harm under non-thermal thresholds. Judges must rule based on federal compliance alone. No pathway for modern science. Even if thousands of peer-reviewed studies highlight potential non-thermal risks, it doesn't matter under law. The local or state authority shall not regulate on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions. This is not mere speculation. Cases have played out nationwide, leaving communities powerless. So while many Americans wonder why not just fight it in court, the answer is that Section 704 essentially preempted that fight, making it legally moot to argue health concerns. Corporate influence and telecom profits, more powerful than parents? Follow the money. The telecom industry, a multi-billion-dollar behemoth, consistently ranks among the top lobby spenders in Washington. Section 704 gave them exactly what they wanted: frictionless expansion of infrastructure, with no pesky local holdups about safety. The result? A robust cellular network and a lock on local democracy. Children or corporations? When you pit parents worried about RF radiation around a school versus large telecom corporations, it's an uneven match. Under normal circumstances, local democracy could weigh the issue and decide. But Section 704 ensures corporations almost always prevail. This is why many parents see it as a fundamental betrayal of the American principle that government is by and for the people. If Americans across the political spectrum truly want to champion family values, constitutional freedoms, or limited government intrusion, they should collectively oppose a law that forces them to accept a powerful transmitter in their backyard without recourse. Real-life consequences: a tower 460 feet from a 7-year-old school, a parent's nightmare. You discover your child's classroom sits just 460 feet from a cell tower that was quietly installed over a summer break. You gather a few other parents, brandish the bio-initiative report, and attempt to address the school board or city council. Oxidative stress. Over 80% of studies find significant changes at exposures well below FCC guidelines. Neurological impact. Some evidence suggests impacts on memory, behavior, and concentration in children. Cancer risks. The Ramazzini Institute found linkages between chronic RF exposures and certain tumor types. Yet the board's attorney shrugs. We're sorry, but we can't consider these health arguments. Section 704 of the Telecom Act bars us from rejecting the tower based on them. That is the law as it stands. The debate ends, and the tower remains. A microcosm of the national issue. This scenario echoes nationwide. Parents, teachers, and local officials can't enact a precautionary distance requirement, like keeping towers at least 1,000 or 1,600 feet away from schools, if the telecom meets 1996 guidelines. The heartbreak for families is immeasurable, as they worry about their children's daily, long-term exposure with no legal remedy. The constitutional case against Section 704. Why repeal should be bipartisan. Local autonomy conservatives who champion states' rights and small government should see Section 704 as an overreach. First Amendment. Liberals and progressives often defend free speech and the right to petition. Section 704 denies local communities a voice on health grounds. Consumer safety. Everyone from centrists to independents can agree that up-to-date science is vital for public health policy. Constitutional scholars have long questioned how a federal law can bar a city from referencing environmental or health data. The Supreme Court has yet to fully weigh in, but many suspect a thorough challenge could strike down or force major revisions to Section 704. That challenge won't happen without widespread public pressure. Harnessing anger into action roadmap for repeal. Step 1. Raise awareness. Local forums. Speak about Section 704 at city council meetings, even if the council can't change it, to put it on record. Social media campaigns. Use the same fervor that drives food dye outrages to highlight Section 704's assault on parental rights. Step 2. Demand accountability from politicians. Ask direct questions. Put lawmakers on the spot. Will they support a bill to repeal or revise Section 704? Highlight contradictions. If someone claims to be pro-Constitution yet ignores a law that stifles the 10th Amendment, challenge them publicly. Step 3. Mobilize across political lines, united coalitions. People of all ideologies share the desire to protect children. Put aside differences and unify on this single critical issue. Leverage grassroots. The same energy seen in MAGA or MAHA can be harnessed if they realize how Section 704 contradicts their core values. Step 4. Propose replacements for 1996 FCC guidelines. Modern science. Ensure any new law allows localities to reference current research, NTP, Ramazzini, peer-reviewed journals. Protect vulnerable populations. Children, pregnant women, the immunocompromised. Recognize their unique susceptibilities. Step 5. Keep the spotlight on. Ongoing media engagement. Write op-eds, create local investigative segments, or highlight personal stories of families impacted by unwanted tower placements. Prepare legal challenges. If a local board denies a tower on health grounds and the company sues, use that as a test case to push upward in the courts. Common objections and counter-arguments. We need towers for better service. Repealing or amending Section 704 doesn't prohibit wireless infrastructure. It simply grants local communities the right to consider potential health data and propose safer siting guidelines. Non-thermal effects are unproven. Decades of studies suggest otherwise. The legislative process should allow these studies to be debated, not preempt them. We can't overburden telecom with red tape. Accountability isn't red tape. Constitutional rights should not be dismissed for corporate convenience. Courts have upheld Section 704. It must be fine. Courts uphold many laws for decades before society deems them unjust. Past acceptance doesn't guarantee constitutionality or moral correctness. Think of historical examples of overtly unjust laws. To anyone who loves America's constitutional bedrock, whether you're a dyed-in-the-wool MAGA believer, a MAHA advocate, a centrist who champions local governance, or a progressive who fights for environmental justice, Section 704 should be recognized as an affront to the very freedoms we all claim to honor. It denies the 10th Amendment by snatching away local authority to address legitimate health concerns about RF radiation. It undercuts the First Amendment by banning entire topics like health impacts from public debate and legal action. It stunts scientific progress, since new non-thermal findings can't be used to refine or challenge infrastructure deployment. It leaves children vulnerable, especially if towers are sited at alarmingly close distances to schools and playgrounds. No matter where you stand on the debate over the severity of RF radiation's non-thermal effects, the principle remains. Americans should not be forced to give up their right to question and oppose potential harms in their own community. That's a fundamental value this nation was built upon. If you aren't demanding the repeal or at least major reform of Section 704, you're effectively endorsing a federal muzzle on local democracy. MAGA and MAHA step up or stay lost. Both movements claim to care about making America better, but ignoring Section 704 is a huge oversight. If you champion parental rights, child safety, and constitutional values, you have no excuse. There's no reason to keep letting the telecom industry shape the environment with zero accountability to those who live there. Politics is full of slogans about restoring freedom, protecting children, or standing up to big corporations. Section 704 is the litmus test. If a politician or movement can't speak against it, can they truly say they stand for local rights or for real constitutional freedoms? Here's how you can help right now. Educate your network. Share information about Section 704 with friends, neighbors, or social media groups. Emphasize the constitutional angle. This is not merely a health scare, it's about local democracy being undermined. Contact your representatives. Ask pointed questions about whether they support repeal or reform of Section 704. Demand that they address the gap between 1996 thermal-based guidelines and today's science. Form local alliances. Work with parents, teachers, local environmental groups, and anyone else who cares about local autonomy. Present a united front so your city council or state legislators see broad community support for challenging the status quo. Use the court strategically. If a tower dispute arises, consult attorneys who understand the deeper constitutional issues. While current law seems stacked against you, a well-publicized case might push the judiciary to re-examine Section 704's overreach. Keep children in the spotlight. Share real-life stories about kids' schools overshadowed by new towers. Remind the public and media that children, who are more susceptible to non-thermal biological impacts, have zero voice in these processes. American democracy has always rested on the ability of local communities to make decisions that reflect their values, especially when it comes to protecting the next generation. The Founding Fathers argued fiercely for state and local authority. The Constitution enumerates checks and balances precisely to stop oppressive central rules that ignore local realities. Section 704 is the antithesis of that vision. Passed in the mid-1990s, it remains on the books, largely unchallenged, handing telecom companies near-complete immunity from parental, environmental, or community-based health concerns. It is, in many ways, the perfect storm of corporate lobbying plus government complacency. If you're not demanding the repeal of Section 704, you are effectively endorsing the handover of your local rights, your children's health, and your constitutional freedoms. You can't wave the Constitution in one hand while ignoring a law that blatantly sidelines First and 10th Amendment principles with the other, and you can't claim to champion children if you won't confront a statute that leaves them potentially at risk. No matter what political label you wear, MAGA, MAHA, progressive, or independent, protecting kids and safeguarding the Constitution should be a unifying cause. Until Section 704 is repealed or radically revised, communities across America will remain stripped of their rightful powers, forced to accept towers they do not want, with guidelines that do not reflect current science and no legal recourse to question it. That is not the America any of us should accept. Speak up, push your local officials, contact your state and federal representatives, and remind them freedom means the freedom to protect our families, and no Clinton-era relic should block that right. If enough of us refuse to be silent, we can end the tyranny of outdated laws, restore local democracy, and ensure that no one else wakes up to the sight of a tower overshadowing their child's playground with zero recourse in the name of federal compliance. Visit RF Safe to learn more.